Okay, so now we are on the fourth method, the quadratic formula and the discriminant. So you have just heard the quadratic formula song in the YouTube video that goes to Pop Goes the Weasel. So we have that song, and now we're going to keep using that equation. So our quadratic formula, as we remember, is x equals, and they say negative b. You can also say the opposite of b, plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4 times a times c all over 2 times a. Now, we use this for the quadratic formulas that we have, or quadratic equations that look like ax squared plus bx plus c, and then remember we've been equaling it to 0. So that's where we get the a, b, and c from. So let's go ahead and look at the example 1. So how can you use the quadratic formula to find the solution of x squared minus 7x equals 4x? So like I said up here, is you have to have it equal to 0. You need to have ax squared plus bx plus c. So I need to get this to be equal to 0. So I need to move the 4x to the other side. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to subtract 4x from both sides. So you end up with x squared minus 4x minus 7 equals 0. And I want to keep in the same format since I have my bx right here in the middle. I'm going to put that as my middle term. So then, now what you do is you just plug it in and solve. So in this case, a would be 1 because there's nothing in front of x. B would be negative 4. Since it's plus right here and it switches to subtraction, it's going to be negative. And c is going to be negative 7. And then now what you do is you just plug in for a, b, and c. So right here it says negative b, or the opposite of b. This is negative 4. So the opposite of negative 4 is positive 4. So x equals 4 plus or minus the square root. B squared, this is negative 4. So negative 4 squared minus 4 times a is 1 and c is negative 7. All over 2 times a, which is 1. So now we saw what's inside, what's underneath the radical, underneath the square root. So I'm going to do equals 4 plus or minus the square root. So negative 4 squared, which is negative 4 times negative 4 is positive 16. Then negative 4 times 1 is negative 4. And times negative 7 is positive 28. All over 2 times 1, which is 2. So I'm going to add those two together. So you get 4 plus or minus the square root of 44 all over 2. So it's plus or minus. So now at this point, once you have everything underneath the square root solved and you just have one number, now we're going to break this up into two equations. So we're going to have 4 plus the square root of 44 divided by 2. And then we're going to have 4 minus the square root of 44 divided by 2. And then since the square root of 44 is not a perfect square, you can use the calculator, or if you have access to the Desmos, you can plug that in. But you're going to go ahead and do 4 plus the square root of 44. And then divide that by 2. You end up with 5.31. And then over here you do 4 minus the square root of 44 and divide that by 2. You end up with negative 1.317. And those are your two answers. So now go ahead and look at practice 1 and practice 2. And try them on your own. Go ahead and pause the video and try to see if you can solve them, and we're going to go over the answers in just a moment. Okay, so for practice 1, it's the same like the example. We need to get this 18x to the other side. So I'm going to subtract 18x on both sides. So you get x squared minus 18x plus 12 equals 0. Because remember, it needs to equal 0. Okay? A equals 1, B equals negative 18, and C equals 12. So then you plug it in. So x equals the opposite of b, opposite of negative 18 is 18, plus or minus the square root of negative 18 squared minus 4 times 1 times 12. All over 2 times 1. Okay. We solve everything underneath the parentheses. So negative 18 squared is 324. Negative 4 times 1 is negative 4, times 12 is negative 48. So you have 324 minus 48. So you get 18 plus or minus the square root of 276, all over 2. And now it gets broken up into two equations. 18 plus the square root of 276 over 2. And 18 minus the square root of 276 over 2. Solve for both, you get 17.307 and 0.693. That's what you should have gotten for both of those. And then practice 2 is already in the form that we want it to be of y equals that. So we just set it equal to 0. So 0 equals x squared minus 2x minus 24. A is 1. B is negative 2. C is negative 24. So once again, you just plug it in. 2 plus or minus the square root, negative 2 squared minus 4 times 1 times negative 24. All over 2 times 1. If we solve what's inside the square root, you get 2 plus or minus the square root of 100 over 2. Break that into two equations. So 2 plus the square root of 100 divided by 2. And 2 minus the square root of 100 divided by 2. Now the square root of 100, this is a perfect square. So what times what equals 100? Same number, it's 10. So 2 plus 10 over 2. 2 plus 10 is 12. Divided by 2 is 6. Now I do the subtraction. 2 minus 10 over 2. Negative 8 divided by 2 equals negative 4. Okay. Go ahead and flip the notes over. We're going to talk about the discriminant real quick. So the discriminant, what this does, it tells me how many solutions, or 0, the equation has. So how many solutions the equation has. And you find this by using what's underneath the square root in our equation. So the formula is b squared minus 4 times a times c. So what was underneath the square root? So we're going to go ahead and look at all of these three right here, and based on the discriminant, determine how many solutions the function will have. So before we graph, before we do anything, we need to know how many solutions there are. You're going to be asked that sometimes. So all you do is you plug it in here. So I have x squared minus 4x plus 3. So in this case, my b is negative 4 squared minus 4 times my a is 1, my c is 3. So negative 4 squared is 16 minus negative 4 times 1 is negative 4 times 3, negative 12. So 16 minus 12 equals 4. So this is a positive number. So if your number is positive after you solve this, that means there are 2 real solutions. So when your answer is positive. Okay, so now let's look at the next one. So now I have my a value as negative 1, my b value is 4, and my c is negative 4. So we have 4 squared minus 4 times negative 1 times negative 4. 4 squared is 16. Negative 4 times negative 1 is positive 4. Positive 4 times negative 4 is negative 16. 16 minus 16 is 0. So when your answer is 0, that means there is one real solution. When your answer is 0. That means it's only going to cross the x-axis once. Okay, now I have my last one, x squared minus 4x plus 5. Once again, my b is negative 4 squared minus 4 times 1 times 5. Negative 4 squared is positive 16 minus 4 times 1 is 4, or negative 4, times 5 is negative 20, so 16 minus 20, which gives you negative 4. So if your answer is negative, there are no real solutions. So when your answer is negative. Okay? So now go ahead and do practice 3 and practice 4. Go ahead and pause the video and see what you get. Okay, practice 3. Negative 10 squared minus 4 times 1 times 25. You end up with 100 minus 100, which equals 0. So that means there's, when it's 0, it's one real solution. Okay, and then practice 4 is negative 3 squared minus 4 times 2 times negative 1. You get 9 plus 8, which equals 17. So it's a positive number. So there's two real solutions.